Thank you for listening to the BJJ Brick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to the BJJ Brick Podcast. This week we have a milestone episode, and I'm not just saying a milestone episode because we have Miles Lukas on today. Miles is going to talk to us and drop some knowledge and share some stuff with us here shortly. But when I was saying this is a milestone episode 300. When we started this way back, about 6 years ago, never thought we'd make it to 300. But we are at 300. The only thing I thought that might make it to 300 would be my weight as I got a little bit older. But that hasn't happened either. But I have my good buddy Joe Thomas and Byron on the show today. How are you guys doing?
Doing good, Gary. Doing good.
Yeah, I'm also doing good. This is exciting. Episode 300. In the past we've made like a big thing about the hitting episode 100 or episode 200. I think we're just kind of nose to the grindstone, have an interview and a normal type of a show, but really happy. It's good to look back and think that we've done this 300 times at a show like this.
Yeah.
And
you think about what all has happened, in 300 episodes. I mean, we've got a BJJ Brick event, and we have another one coming up June 14th through 16th. We had people coming in from all over the United States to meet us and check out the event. Not to meet us, but to actually see our great people we brought in
and meet Gary.
But, you. But we also had we've also been voted the number 2 ranked podcast in the world. So I mean, a couple of cool things have happened. I keep throwing that one out there because I had never seen an article have us so highly rated, so I thought I'd just throw it out there.
But you just say podcast, not even martial arts podcast.
Oh, sorry, martial arts podcast. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. I mean, where else? I mean, what other jiu-jitsu podcast has had a New York Times bestseller on it, multiple world champions, and Miles Lukas? Who has had that? Us. And us only.
That we know of. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. One of the best additions has been Joe. Man, so we get emails from people that say, "Hey, found the podcast. I'm going back. I'm listening to all of them," and man, I'm honored. Like my wife wouldn't listen to all these episodes if I died today. They would. Just
I actually don't listen to them.
But that's funny because I know where Byron's going with this. I did listen to everyone starting with number 1. You know how many I've listened to since I've become regular on the show?
4.
Maybe. I do go check out some of the interviews that Byron does, but it's the old Pee Wee Herman thing. I lived that adventure.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, we ask a lot of times for people to send us articles, that we can use on the show. We'd rather use one of our listeners' articles. And Joe just started sending them in, and we got to talk to Joe. We had him on a couple times to talk about his article. And, the rest is history. I mean, we weren't even ranked in the top 10 martial arts podcasts nationwide until Joe joined us. So, Joe kind of took us over the top. And like I said, I wasn't really enjoying this podcast with Byron. As you know, Byron and I don't get along too well. But now with Joe, it's I'm happy again.
Well, I know y'all are trying to make me feel good, but for the listeners, the reality is every team just needs a good mascot. So once they added that, we're good to go.
Joe, you are the brick. If we had a mascot, you'd be in some big brick costume and big old smile on there, and you would go around fighting other mascots from other sports. That would be fantastic.
Oh, that would be awesome.
And I have my money on Joe to beat up all the other mascots.
Well, that'd be one type of a game to watch, is some mascot fighting. But if you want to get better at jiu-jitsu, we have 6 games for BJJ that help your training. It's going to really take your training to a different place and enhance what you're doing. That's what these are designed to do. It's an audiobook made by me. It's about an hour long. It's $6.99. I don't know where I came up with $6.50. And basically,
Inflation, Byron.
I should bump it up a little bit at this episode. But basically, while you're rolling, when you go to roll, typically you have a goal of, do well, submit the person, maybe get a good position, maybe working on some technique. This is going to change your parameters to where you have different goals. And when you change those goals, you're still doing the same thing. You're still doing jiu-jitsu, but you're going to have to find different ways to get the problem solved. And it really opens your eyes to different parts of jiu-jitsu that you may know, but you may not have to experience very often. And for me, playing games like these 6 training games, and these are my top 6, have really expanded my jiu-jitsu within myself. It's kind of weird. Like some of the biggest moments I've had was when Renato Tavares or Andre Montero have shown me some grappling techniques, or Justin Rader, taught some really cool stuff. And just whatever, at the BJJ Break camp, I've learned some really game-changing things. But some of these game-changing things have become into my game from experimenting with my own game through games like this. And I invite you to take on the challenge of these. They will change the way you roll. You may not roll as well, but you'll learn a lot when you do. And it's a fun way to do jiu-jitsu a little bit differently. So there'll be a link to this in the show notes. It's called 6 BJJ Training Games. It's about an hour long, and it's much like a podcast like you're listening to now. Gary, last week you had a really interesting off-the-mat lesson about your basketball team that you're coaching, and one of the kids didn't show up, and you still played down a person. I'm hoping you have something in the similar category about this team that we're rooting for.
Well, yeah, I want everybody listening to root for the Wichita Warriors. We are a motley crew led by a motley coach. But I will tell you, I do have a good lesson from this last week's game. We only had one game this weekend. So we're, it comes Friday. I start thinking about our game.
Gary, hold on a second. So, I think a lot of listeners don't even know how old are these kids, and a little bit of give us, is this high school? Is it a teenager?
No.
Okay.
These are 12 and under kids.
Okay.
Most of these kids play year round. We play with some really, really solid teams, and we are towards the bottom of the league. We're a new team. Basically, this is just our second session together. They've played maybe 20 games together. So we're getting better as we get used to each other. But if you've heard some of the stories I've already talked about, you can see the ups and downs we've had. And, kind of what happened this week, we normally have practice Friday night for 2 hours. And out of the blue, practice was canceled. I'm the assistant coach, not the head coach. So, we canceled practice to be honest, I really don't know why. And so Saturday, we have a game. So, I get my boy ready. We actually worked a little bit in the afternoon, worked on ball handling and little things like that, and just talked about the game. And we show up for the game, and no head coach. Two of our players didn't show up. I know I had the issue last week where 3 of our players didn't show up, and we only had 4. We started off the season with 9. We've lost a couple people. And now we're down to, we have 5 people. Regular coach isn't there. And as my players are warming up, a couple of my kids are all like, "Where's coach?" And I really didn't know. And they're asking where the other 2 players are. I was like, I'm not 100% sure where they're at, but, no biggie. I was like, we're going to go out. We're going to play as hard as we can. And the cool thing is we get to play the whole game. And, the big thing we ended up playing very hard. We ended up winning the game. We ended up blowing the other team out. I think it's the best my team has played. I think the week before when we only had 4 people and almost won, I thought that was the best we played up until then. And, it's just the lesson is the adversity we're going to deal with. Never is anything going to go right. I mean, this is now 2 weeks in a row. And the 2 weeks before that, we've had other stuff happen with, people not on the team anymore. So, we think about it as we're older that we're going to run into a lot of stuff at work with our families, our kids, stuff like that. But, you don't think about it as much as 12-year-old kids dealing with adversity. I've got a diverse group of kids, different backgrounds, and so these kids, I have no clue really what they have going on at home, but I don't think they could have any more adversity than what we've been dealing with, on the basketball court. People not showing up, not knowing where they're at. And, I'm just proud of these kids for just pushing through. And you think about it, jiu-jitsu. We go to a jiu-jitsu tournament, and normally you're going to have your team. You're probably going to have, anywhere from 5 to 20 people, or depending how big your school is at a tournament. Who knows how many people you got to coach, and it could be your turn to be called, and your coach is nowhere around. You may have to have one of your buddies or a teammate coach you, and you really wanted to have your coach who's a world champion coach you, and it just doesn't always work that way, but you're just going to have to just go in there and, compete as hard as you can. Same thing could happen. You could be entering 2 divisions at one time. You just finish one match and no rest whatsoever, and you get called again. You really never know what's going to happen. You just have to push through it. And, that's what these kids did. They were asking me all questions. They seemed a little concerned. And, before tip-off, I just sat them all down. I was like, hey, the positives are you get to play the whole game. Nobody likes to come out. Let's play. Tell me if you're tired. We'll call a timeout. But the one thing we can control is our heart, our passion. Hey, and these guys got the heart and the passion this time. Last time I told you, they didn't get it, but these guys played with heart and passion, and that's why we won. And the game was over, and it's been 24 hours now, and I'm still on a big high. It's my first game I've ever coached by myself, and I played basketball for so many years, and I've never really wanted to coach, and I always told myself I wouldn't coach my own kid for. I'll coach him on the side, but I didn't want to coach a team with my own kid. I didn't really want the favoritism, that you hear about all the time. But I'm having a blast. I've never had so much fun in my life, and these kids are inspiring me. I'm going to take everything I've learned from these kids. I'm going to be better at jiu-jitsu. I'm going to be better at life. I'm going to be a better husband, family man. I'm going to be better at my work. And whoever thought that I would learn this much from a diverse group of 12-year-olds facing adversity?
Man, that's awesome, Gary. I like the way you drug it back on the jiu-jitsu mats, but man, bringing it back to basketball, you're teaching those kids skills that are going to pay dividends later in life in consequential matters. That's a great thing about kids' sports is kids learn to deal with adversity. They learn to deal with winning and losing in an arena where there are no consequences, really. I mean, it doesn't matter when you're 30 years old if you won the championship when you were 12 or if you lost every game. The wins and losses don't matter, but the lessons they're learning matter. And, you get older and you have a stretch of at work where things are difficult, or in your marriage where things are difficult, or, whatever comes up, those lessons you learn in the sporting arena when you're kids, that's when they come to fruition. I love the way you're taking these kids and saying, hey, look, here's the situation, but here's what's good about it. Here's what we can get out of it that's positive. And then you're getting the best out of those kids.
Yeah, and you know what my favorite part of the whole thing was? We've got one kid who couldn't the 1 week where he had to play 4, he couldn't play, and I found out he got suspended from school and his mom wouldn't let him play, which I'm totally agree with that. And I don't really know his home life, but he's a really good basketball player, but he doesn't take well to authority, and he I don't know how to say it, but I've never seen the kid smile, and he really has trouble with authority, and him and the head coach really, they butt heads like you couldn't believe. But this kid's always been my favorite. I guess he kind of reminds me of me when I was his age. So I talked to him before the game, and I was like, hey, because this guy, every time he goes out, he does something that the head coach doesn't like and gets pulled really quick. And, then he sulks and his game just goes downhill. So I basically took him beforehand, and I was like, hey, I want you to shoot. I want you to score. I'm going to have you play point. I'm going to have you bring the ball up. I want to see a smile on your face. I want the very first time down court, I want you to shoot. And because he always gets in trouble if he shoots too much. But it was nice because the kid had his best game ever. He ended up scoring 16 points out of our 51. So as you can see, that's basically a third of our points. But he had a smile on his face the whole game. And he has now scored 16 points in the whole season combined. I know he has it because I played against him in another league. I know what he is. He just, having trouble fitting in on this team. And I just hope I see that smile. And that's my goal. That's been my goal this whole season, is to get him to smile, because I don't see it a lot. And I was just so proud of him. And I was just so neat to just see a smile on his face. And that's what I want to see the whole season.
Yep, and you kind of let it slip out there, Gary. Everybody knows that you're a little bit of a basketball player, and now we know you've been sandbagging in the kids' league because you just said you played against this kid earlier. So, man, you scored a few points that season, huh?
No, actually, these kids school me. So
yeah, they shut you down.
Yeah. No, what I meant is my son has played against this kid in different leagues before, so I've always seen. Yeah. I know enough not to suit up with these kids.
Yeah, because they're definitely a different place in life than you are. You're writing one chapter, and they're writing another, and that kind of leads us to our quote of the week. Don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. And we're not really sure who wrote this quote. I dropped it in a Google box, and it just comes up as kind of a lot of people use it. But man, it's tailor-made for jiu-jitsu. You can't be comparing yourself if you've been doing jiu-jitsu for 6 months to somebody that's been doing it for 3 years, and really even time isn't necessarily the qualifier for what chapter you're on. Sometimes you'd be training jiu-jitsu for 3 years and your buddy's been training for 3 years, but you're in different chapters. Maybe he's made it to a lot more classes. He's been consistent. Maybe he had some injuries. Maybe he's a competitor. You're not. I mean, all these things kind of put you in a different place. And you're either going to be falsely inflated if you're comparing yourself to others, because maybe for a brief moment at a time you're further along than they are, or you're going to be discouraged because everybody's passing you by, and you don't need to be either one of those things. Just deal with how you're doing and don't worry about everybody else.
Joe, I love that quote. And it just, when you were talking about it, we may be both on chapter 3, but who knows where, how somebody's been training a little bit longer than you. And that brings me back to Byron. Byron and I, as you guys know, who've been listening to the show, started about the same time. And Byron's learning curve was he learned a lot quicker than me when I first started. And Byron had a really good armbar from the guard, and Byron used to throttle me. And I used to just remember telling myself, and when you're new, I really couldn't see my progress, and I measured it by the other new guy, Byron, how we did when we rolled. And I bet when we rolled it looked horrible and when we first started, but Byron used to throttle me, and I used to compare myself to Byron and be like, man, why is he so good and I'm so terrible? And I'm glad that I never really let that affect me enough. Instead of letting it affect me that I might quit, I kind of more used it to, hey, I need to work a little bit harder, work a little bit more, and try to get better. It's just one thing, stuck with it. And, hopefully now Byron's on chapter 20, and hopefully I'm at chapter 18 and, catching up every day. Well, trying to catch up every day.
That's Gary, you're not giving yourself enough credit, but that's a great quote. Don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. And I think that we talked about it quite a bit already, but that's so easy to do in jiu-jitsu. You come in, you put in some time, and you try really hard, and you're still feel like you're just going nowhere with this. Everybody else is way better than you are. It's not a fair comparison. Gary and I both, when we started, we're absolutely horrible, and now we're just kind of mediocre.
Mediocre horrible.
But it's not fair to yourself to do that. You need to give yourself time to get good at this. This is a skill-based activity, and if you compare yourself with your 6 months of somebody who's been training 10 years, they are on chapter 20 compared to what you've done. That's ridiculous to think that, well, that guy's way better than me, or there's so much knowledge between myself and that person. Right now, in this day and age, as we bring up this new crop of blue belts, every one of those blue belts I feel that I've seen in the past 5 years is substantially better than I was when I was a blue belt. Not a knock on myself, not a knock on my training. It's just a different approach to jiu-jitsu, different teaching methods, different learning, a different classroom with more people and different styles. All those blue belts, even the people who are, a lot lighter weight than I was, and I wasn't that strong when I was blue belt, but not that strong now.
You're not strong now. Yeah.
But they'd all tap me out. So I think somewhere around like a 2-stripe white belt or so would have been a nightmare to me as a blue belt back in my day as a blue belt. That's not fair to compare myself to that and to think, man, I sucked. That's not fair to me to compare my chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 1, because they're different. We've learned a lot about jiu-jitsu. We've learned a lot about how to teach jiu-jitsu since then, and it's just you're on your own journey. Write the next chapter. And the only thing that happens when you quit writing is you are gonna get worse. You're just gonna fade away, and you'll find something else to do. Hopefully, that's just as fun or enjoyable. But jiu-jitsu has so many great benefits to it. Keep writing those chapters in the book, and it won't be long, and you'll kind of find your own book that you're writing. And maybe it's 6 games for BJJ, 6 chapters in that book that help you write your own style. But looking at Gary.
Does that mean because there's only 6 chapters in that book, does that mean you still got 14 left to get up to 20?
Could be. And I don't know, why you'd want to stop at 20. Almost every grappler in the world, except for there's just a couple of guys and gals, look at somebody else and say, that person's way better than me. That I needed to train super hard to hang with that person. And it just goes up and up. And if that's not a motivating thing, it could be a terrible thing to where you don't want to do this anymore. You just need to treat yourself fairly. And, you look at this journey, and we're going to talk to Miles Lukas here in a minute, and he had an amazing journey through his jiu-jitsu. And I think it's just great to hear somebody else's story of coming up, a long time ago and doing jiu-jitsu and is now a black belt and is focused on different areas of training and of jiu-jitsu and dealing with injuries. All these things are chapters in his book, and I think we can learn a lot from that today. So let's kick off our interview with Miles Lukas. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
One time, during a bridge, he passed gas, and the price of oil went up 10% a barrel. He defends a double leg blast with one leg. He has fought Cletus 3 times at the dinner table. All 3 fights started with Cletus walking over and ended with Cletus limping back.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Brick podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Miles Lukas to the BJJ Brick podcast. Miles, welcome to the show.
Byron, so nice to be here.
It's nice to have you. I was kind of made aware of you. You had a very interesting post on Reddit, and one of the Reddit readers, David, had tagged me in it. I should do a better job of reading things on Reddit, but I don't, and posting things. But man, I read your story, or read what you posted anyway, and I thought it was a great thing to learn about you and what you've done and some of the mental processes that you went through. And I think that's you're highly relatable to a lot of grapplers. But Miles, introduce yourself a little bit off the mat and a little on the mat to the audience. Could you please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm about 40 years old, and I started jiu-jitsu back in the late 90s, in the heyday, in the golden age, you might say. And I was even in South Carolina when I started. So jiu-jitsu was a bit obscure, and I was in an obscure place, doing an obscure sport. And it was just a lot of fun. And all the things in my Reddit post about how difficult jiu-jitsu can be, it's certainly true. And that's why I like your guys' podcast so much, is you guys don't make it sound easy. And you talk about the struggles a lot. And it's 100% true. And in order to stay with doing jiu-jitsu for a long time, you got to learn so many other things. That's not just jiu-jitsu, right? You have to learn how to fix and repair your joints and to deal with injuries and all that stuff. And that was the struggle for the last 20 years. So I made it through, and I eventually did get my black belt, although I never in a million years thought I would, especially back then when even a purple belt was like a magic dragon that you'd see. It could do crazy things to people that you couldn't explain. And so here we are. I got my black belt, and I started to really figure out how to stay in shape. And I'm in much better shape than I was even in my 20s. And then I started to do the Fight to Wins, which is just an insane promotion. And now I feel almost obligated to teach some of the things that I've learned, and really created some simple principles that people can follow. And it's just amazing the transformation that people can make with jiu-jitsu, especially. But then if you stick with it, you really learn a lot of lessons about life, which is neat.
Yeah. Miles, I can remember in my own journey not even thinking about being a black belt until I was handed a brown belt, and my instructor said, black belt's next.
Yes.
I didn't even think about this as like a thing. Like, it's so far away, and it's in that, I think it helps. I think it helped me anyway, not thinking about it, because as a white belt or a blue belt or even a purple belt, like, it is very far away. It's just really it seemed like the day-to-day focus on getting better at something on the mats, and whether it was getting better at a sweep or a choke or something like that. Don't worry about that belt. Just work on getting better at an element of your jiu-jitsu.
Well, and we always don't. A lot of times we don't celebrate the small wins. So that even improves your jiu-jitsu. When you are stuck in side control, or I'm sorry, stuck in like bottom half guard, and you just pass a knee, man, that's a big win. And a lot of people are going for sweeps and doing all this stuff, but if you just pass a knee over and get through the first half, that's completely worth celebrating. So to those long off goals of a black belt or a higher belt or anything is those are great. But man, when you stack up the small wins, you can really have a much more enjoyable journey.
Yeah, I'm excited for the interview because you bring up things that I don't even think about. But yeah, I remember having like small wins with trying to do a triangle choke, and my first thing was not to have somebody pass my guard within a minute, and so because I need to be able to maintain my guard to do a triangle. And then the second thing was be able to set it up, get it to where they have one arm in and one arm out of my guard, and that I was like, that's a big step, and I would never finish the choke, but I would get to where I could set it up first, and then I could maybe maintain that for a few weeks to go by, and then eventually I started getting some finishes with the triangle choke. And I think that's a lot of jiu-jitsu, is just celebrating those small things, because it's so easy to say, oh, my triangle is not any good, let's do something else I can figure out, or give up altogether. But if you could break it down into small parts and then acknowledge when you're able to do those things, that is a huge thing that could help you stay on the mats.
That's right. And too, we get caught up in the steps a lot, and I can't remember a lot of steps when people are teaching me. So if something's more than 3 steps, I mean, you almost need to tell me 5 or 6 times. But what's neat is after I got my black belt, what I started to do is improvise a whole lot more. And then once you start improvising, it's not the steps anymore. All of a sudden, you're learning these principles, and then these principles transcend the steps, and you can follow these principles instead of this. I have a butterfly sweep that I like to teach the guys, and I call it like a 32-in-1 sweep, because we talk about all the different ways you can get a hold of the guy's post. Well, there's 4 ways you can get his post. There's 4 ways that you can grab the other half of his body. You can use either foot to sweep. And if you add up all the multiples, it would be 32 different sweeps if you interchanged all the different ways you could do it. But it's only 3 principles. So that's pretty neat too. Once you start to understand the steps, then you can see the principles that go through, that shoots through all these steps. And man, it makes it even that I think that's what getting a brown belt, getting a purple belt, getting a black belt, that's what starts to happen. is why people say, "Oh, now I just started learning again." Like I'm starting from the beginning. It's because you start to find those principles, and man, then the world gets even bigger.
Yeah, I like that method of teaching because it shows that, like, so many times you get somebody who's fairly new at jiu-jitsu, and it's like, do step 1, and then somewhere between step 1 and step 2, it falls apart, and if you can't get to step 2, it's not going to work, and at step 2, there's no step 3. But there's so many, because you're fighting against an unwilling opponent, and
that's right.
And you need those options. You need solutions to what they're going to bring to you. It's a great way. Would you recommend, like, when you're new, or if you're in a part of the game you don't fully understand, to go by the steps for a while?
Definitely, because you have to, right? Because you have to. You can't see the principles yet in the beginning, but I think that learning the principles is the neat thing down the road. But those initial steps, I mean, you just got to see what works. But I think that one thing that beginners could realize that I certainly didn't, and most don't, is that there is an element of improvisation that can be used, and that you can be confident that, since, like you said, our opponent is unwilling, you can be confident to do a little bit of improvisation in order to make those steps. The steps aren't quite so solidified. So, because there's so many variations, right? I mean, it's infinite. Grappling is completely infinite. So to have the confidence after you've learned the steps to throw improv in your game a little bit early on, and then it might help you learn and see maybe why those steps were so important.
Yeah, and just to look at the other side of it, sometimes you improv a little bit and you get your guard passed. Like that's part of learning, though.
Right. That's right, especially if you have a bigger, stronger opponent.
But it's just that's part of learning, and it's time to work on your side control escapes or your mount escapes or something like that. But yeah, I think that's a pretty natural thing, is to want to, if something's not working, to try to figure out, how do you do this? And it's just doing that over the course of many, many years, like you and I have done. We learn kind of that process of what's likely to work, or where should I take this with improving, where comes next.
Well, I love how you guys focus too on what beginners should do and what's going to help you the most, because it is such it's so difficult. It's such a difficult thing to do in the very beginning, especially if you're a little bit older and you're not in your 30s or 40s. It's definitely doable, and it's a lifelong endeavor if you're able to sort of stick out the first couple of years, right?
Yep, I agree, and I appreciate the the nod of that we're trying to do here. That's everybody's different. We have a lot of listeners who are in their teens or 20s, and we have a lot of listeners who are well above 60, and the same podcast goes out to everybody. But the main thing is we're all on our own journey. Like, if you're starting now and you're 60, there's no point in thinking about, man, I wish I would have started when I was 50 or, when I was younger. It just proceed with who you are today and make the best of that. And I think that's how ultimately both of us got to the point of being a black belt, is just proceed today and do my best, listen to my coach, try to figure out what's going on with my body, and will this technique work for me? And do I need to add this technique to my game? There's a lot to it. But I think there's two types of white belts out there, really. There's the white belt who thinks someday I'm going to be a black belt, and there's a white belt who thinks, I just want to get a little bit better. And I think that both of them could become really good at jiu-jitsu. Both can ultimately become black belts, or that's not like the pinnacle of the sport is to be a black. It's just I think an easy milestone to look at to say this person made it to this level. But I think it's an easier road, and maybe a less frustrating road to just try to get a little bit better today. That's
right. And I think too, I love talking about what to do as a beginner. Embrace those. There's some things that you can embrace, such as bigger opponents. That's one thing that's it's very difficult, and we don't want to. We don't want to get injured, and so we want to be careful of who our opponent is. But a neat thing about bigger opponents is that less moves work on them. So the amount of moves that you need to learn becomes smaller and smaller. The bigger the guy gets, the less moves that are going to work. So it's like your pool of moves that you need to learn is gets to be really tiny when you start going against people that are a lot bigger than you, a lot stronger than you, maybe a lot more experienced. And so again, yes, don't worry about winning. Don't worry about your next belt. Worry about learning the things that work. And there's a good way to do it with those bigger guys.
That's an interesting concept that I looking at how I play against a bigger person, if I'm, if we're really like going at it in a more, less playful way, we're both trying to kind of perform well. I want that person's back. That's the answer I have. Right. And so like, I'm looking at what moves work for that. Am I arm dragging? Is there, am I going to be on top? Is that even an option? Or what am I going to do to get to their back? That's it. All pass I'm going to try to do is to the back. That's and right. Even if I'm trying to sweep them, I'm really trying to get them to expose their back in that process. Like a lot of my moves are control. Gone. Yeah.
That's right.
And it makes it in a way, like you look at the difficult task of submitting somebody who's got you by 100 pounds, but it does make it simpler. There's only going to be a few things I'm going to try. And like you said, with like, there's a lot of different ways to do those. And if I try to arm drag him and he reacts this way or does this, I've got a lot of different things I could do to answer that. And so it kind of makes this combination. Yeah, maybe 6 ways I'm going to get his back, but 6 times, the 10 other reactions he might have. There's a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and I think we should really cherish those bigger guys in our gym. I've had the good fortune. I was at Guerrilla Jiu-Jitsu in San Jose for a long time under Matt Darcy, Dave Camarillo. You guys interviewed Dave not too long ago. That was pretty cool. And we created our own little a team inside our team. We called them Team Size Matters. And nobody in there was under 230 pounds. I mean, it was just a handful of absolute monsters. We had a guy, Big Jeff. He was about 6'10", over 230. And what a unique body style to deal with, And you couldn't take his back. I took his back one time, and perfect hooks in. It was one of my best days of my, or I thought it was going to be one of my best days of my jiu-jitsu career. I have his back. I'm about to flatten him out. He was a purple belt at the time. He's a brown belt now, by the way. He is an absolute savage. And as I'm trying to flatten him out, I mean, he's so much bigger than me. He just rolls to the side gently, probably trying to be nice, and it popped my knee out of place.
Oh man. Yeah,
and so okay. Well, now what am I going to do? This back take where you flatten someone out is supposed to be the king. This should work on anybody, and so that's pretty neat. So now I have to come up with a new way. After a little bit of time off to repair my knee, I have to come up with a new way to be able to control this guy. So I learned that on those bigger guys, on those guys that are 100 pounds, maybe even bigger than you, that a back crucifix, that the crucifix is actually much more effective than controlling a guy that's so much bigger than you.
Yeah.
And so, man, guys, I encourage everyone to really embrace those big guys and encourage them and keep them going. And realize what a special thing it is to be able to test your skills against someone that's that much bigger than you.
Yeah, and it is, you guys made like a kind of a team there. It's important for them to have each other because it's like if you just show up and train, if you're 180 pounds or whatever, and you show up and train with the kids class all the time, it's going to be really hard to get to become good at jiu-jitsu. And if you outweigh everybody by 200 pounds or by 100 pounds, and you show up at jiu-jitsu, and that's always the case, it's difficult to get those tough rolls that you need. So you big people need other large individuals to grapple with to help them find their game.
So, I mean, if you're 180 and you're showing up the kids class like Kramer out of Seinfeld and karate, You're just kicking everyone's butt. Yeah, that's right. You're not going to get very good, are you?
It's going to be hard to challenge yourself. I mean, you might be grappling to them at the same time or something, but no.
That's right.
But yeah, it's. Yeah, I'm always an advocate. If you're the biggest person in the gym, find somebody else that you could bring in. Find a weightlifting buddy that you could start training with, and get somebody near your size. That's very helpful long term. So we've kind of talked a little bit about just general jiu-jitsu stuff, but I do want to talk about your journey because I think that so many of us can relate to that, like having, like your knee injury, and then, sometimes people get injured like that and they're done with jiu-jitsu. They say, hang it up and say, no, thank you. Or having a job that doesn't really fit with your schedule. I'm sure in the many years you've been training, you've had some jobs that didn't really mesh well, or relationships, or, life situations come up, and jiu-jitsu can't always be like the number one thing in all of our lives.
Sure.
Can you kind of address some of those life challenges that you've had to go through?
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful to be able to, have family around me and people that support me to be able to do this, right? I have 2 kids, 2 boys, 8 and 10 years old. And to get away just for an evening for class is, I'm just super grateful that I'm able to do it. So, I let it be known that I try and schedule it in and make sure that, like, hey, this is super important to me, and I'm going to be much nicer after this happens, jiu-jitsu class, and so let's make sure that it happens. The biggest struggle that I overcame throughout this whole thing is injuries, and I was thinking about it today. And the one thing that's going to happen in jiu-jitsu, how often do you think people get injured? Like, if they start jiu-jitsu, what's the likelihood that they're going to get injured from jiu-jitsu?
If you're starting jiu-jitsu, I think it's a pretty high rate.
It's about 1,000%. Like, you are 100% going to get injured in somehow, some way. So that's a neat thing that you have to learn about, on this journey. And what I discovered through years of trying to figure it out is I finally learned how to strengthen my joints, which is giant, because jiu-jitsu is the biggest test of joint manipulation. We call it involuntary yoga. I mean, people are they're gonna get you, and they're gonna mash on your joints. And what was an interesting turning point was actually not that long ago. Do you remember when who is it? Eddie Bravo fought, did that Metamoris with Gracie.
Oh man, that was a brutal match.
Brutal match. He got him in the leg, the vaporizers, right? And then they said afterwards that he was walking around fine the next day. And I thought, man, how weird. He's in his 40s. How did he do that? How is he different than me? Is his ligaments different than mine? Like, why can't my leg pop out of joint like that and then go back and then I'm fine? And the truth is I figured out how to be able to recover from injuries a lot faster, to be able to assess them a lot faster. And it's the dead simplest techniques that I never knew 15 years into jiu-jitsu. And that's the biggest part of the journey is being able to stay healthy. Jiu-jitsu teaches you how to exert yourself with food in your stomach, how to eat, how to do all these things. And then that's another unexpected benefit, is that you got to figure out how to overcome injuries and keep going. And I'd love to share with you guys a little bit, just some things, some tips guys can do.
Absolutely.
If you don't mind. Yeah. So the neat thing is that if you engage your joints for an extended period of time, for like planks or for holds, you really engage all the small tissue, the tendons, the muscles, these tiny muscles around your joints that you don't typically use. And you probably don't use them as much either in like standard weight training or that sort of stuff. So just as an example, if you do a push-up, if you do a push-up for 1 minute, if you take about 20 seconds to go down, if you sit down there for 20 seconds and then go back up, so you took about a minute to do it, man, you're trembling. After you're done, you're all pumped up. You got blood flowing through your chest and your elbows, and you really gain a ton of resilience in your joints with these types of exercises. And they take, that one took a minute. You could do a whole workout series in 5 minutes, and your joints are full of blood. You engaged all the little muscles, and you're really ready to for whatever endeavor, not just jiu-jitsu, but I also like kiteboarding and surfing and soccer and The kids are playing lacrosse now and all this stuff. So that's a really, for the journey, that was probably my biggest turning point in the journey. After you learn how to repair yourself, then you are really ready to take on a lot more.
That's so. What about is it if I do a slow pull up or a slow squat? Does it have the same sort of a thing?
Totally. So if you get to that point where you're trembling, that's where I think is the sweet spot. And again, and this is not from anything I've learned from. I've never, I haven't learned this from anywhere other than experimenting. So I was, I was rolling as a purple belt, as a brown belt, and I was getting. I would have to take a bunch of aspirin or a bunch of pain meds afterwards. We're in California. I had to take weed. I had to take anything I could to get through the night because my back hurt. I mean, I was okay, but I was sore, and I had to overcome that. And so I worked for years on different things to do. I was doing weight training. I was doing ball training, and I was doing the kettlebells, all these things. And what I noticed is that I would get sore from this extracurricular exercise that I would do, and then I would get sore, and I would sometimes tweak something. Right, I would be trying to do some balancing on a ball, and I would tweak my ankle a little bit. And then that night at jiu-jitsu, I inflame whatever I tweaked. I would inflame it even more, and it would turn into like a worse injury. And so that's not going to work. If your supplemental workout for jiu-jitsu is injuring you, then that's not the one you want to do, So I just kept getting lighter and lighter and easier. And then I was just doing like push-ups, sit-ups, and squats. And that was working pretty good. But again, if you do some like leg swinging, like leg lifts, and you start doing turns and that sort of stuff, I would tweak my back just a tiny bit. Nothing bad, but and it was a disservice. So then I just started going slower. And at first I was doing like a 20-second push-up, and then 30, and then 40. And then I just decided I'm only going to do, when I was running out of time, I'm only going to do one. I'm not going to do any sets of anything. I'm going to just do one push-up, one squat, and just do them for as long as I can. And that's when the magic started to happen. That's when I was completely prepared for the jiu-jitsu, and my joints were healing quite quickly, because also when you're going so slow like that, you can do an assessment of any injury, any pain that you have, and you know exactly where it is, and so you know where it's not, and you know where you can exert around the area that it's not painful. So it gives you like a broader range of motion, which is pretty interesting.
So okay, I have like 3 or 4 questions floating around in my head.
Yeah, let's go, Byron. This is fun.
I like how, like we talked about breaking down the technique. Like the one I gave was a triangle. So it's first set up the triangle or maintain my guard, whatever. Like if I can't do a minute-long push-up, first do a 20-second long push-up. And that's like you're still getting to that point where you're shaking or it's very difficult for you. Do you feel that this helps a lot with strength, or is it primarily protection of your joints?
Well, yeah. So I'm not super concerned with strength, because you can add strength if you want to get stronger. You can do whatever type of weight training you want to do or anything. This will make you stronger, but what my primary goal is to be for my joints to be strong. Okay. That's all I care about. I just want my joints not to pop out of place. There's been points in my life where I was in the U.S. Open as a brown belt, and I did a great first match, and then in the middle of my second match, my knee pops out of place in a way that it should not have. Like I was in a pretty stable position. And so it can't do that. I'm not going to be effective in jiu-jitsu if my joints are so unstable that they're going to slip out of place, And this is what, if you do something like this on a daily basis, there's no reason to take days off, because this is so easy to do. I mean, this is like 5 minutes is all you need. Then that's what gets stronger. So now my knee never even gets close to popping out of place.
So what is your little can't skip it routine then? You say quick and easy. I know it has a push-up and probably a squat. What else is involved?
Yeah, push-up and a squat. You could do a lunge. You could do, and I do a sit-up or more like a crunch. But the neat thing is that it's really exercise agnostic. I mean, you could swap in even exercises with weights or anything like that. But the main concept is that you just do the movement as slow as you can possibly do it. Just absolutely to the trembling where you just can't stand anymore. And you get to a point where you're holding it and you're trembling. And it seems like that this is, through experimentation, it seems like this is the safest way to exercise possible. I mean, it's just like you never end these exercises with any tweaks or anything. You only feel stronger. Your that area seems to be just pumped with blood. I mean, I like one exercise I do is like you could call it a one-legged squat, but you don't squat all the way down. You close your eyes, you lift one foot off the ground, and then you just squat down. Just a nice bent knee is all you need to do. But when you're closing your eyes, it makes it difficult to balance. It's actually a health marker to test your inner ear health. But then you do this for a minute, and you could call it like the blind Miyagi's, like Mr. Miyagi, how he would do those. It kind of looks like that.
Okay.
But because you tremble like that, when you're done, you feel like you're wearing an iron boot. And your ankle is strong, your feet, your toes, and your knee are just feel like they are invincible.
Cool. So that's kind of a prevention. if you
yes.
What do you do when something does happen? If your knee pops or your elbow does something, like, do you have anything that helps you get back on the mat a little quicker?
Yes, 100%. So because you've already been doing these things, it does seem to repair faster. But just before any of these exercises, I crack my knees, crack my back, realign everything. And the reason I started doing it is because I was when I would do jiu-jitsu, and when the adrenaline kicks in, and you know this, that you don't feel pain, right? And so when you hear some pops or something, it used to make it hard to assess whether that was an issue or whether that was just like a knuckle cracking type noise. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I had that just last week. I were rolling and my ankle goes crack, and he's like, "Are you okay?" I think I'm okay.
Isn't adrenaline amazing? I mean, you don't know. You don't even know if you're okay. You don't know if tomorrow is going to be, you're going to be hobbling around, because adrenaline sort of masks all that. So what I started to do is I would crack everything. I did a little routine where I would adjust my back, adjust my knees, adjust my ankles, even my toes. I had a point one time where I had an open guard on someone, and my toe was just caught in there a little bit, and it ripped the webbing of my toes because that, it's brutal. But that skin gets sort of, I'm an old guy. What are you going to do? That skin isn't as elastic as it used to. And so now I flex my toes out and spread my toes out and make sure that everything is cracked and aligned. And that way I know later if I hear anything, I know that there was I've gone further than I typically do, and there's probably a problem. So that's pretty important, is that alignment to prevent injuries. And then again, if you do get injured while you're doing that alignment, or while you're doing a nice little stretching routine in the morning or whatever you like, you find that area of inflammation. You isolate it. You isolate that point where it hurts really bad, and then with these simple holds, if it's your elbow, then you could use a push-up to do it. If it's your knee, then you use a squat. And then you find that right in that spot, and you sort of do small circles around it, meaning like you just move it ever so slightly. And what you'll notice, if you need to repair something, if you've already aligned it, you found that area of inflammation, and then you do one or two extra sets of these, then you'll notice on the third set, it doesn't hurt quite as bad. And why I think that happens is because you've engaged all the small muscles around it, and your body doesn't want to feel that pain. So it actually really focuses on trying to engage them. And then and you start to strengthen the muscles and tendons or everything around wherever the problem is, which also helps it heal. So it seems like every time I get injured, it's actually the healing time has been cutting in half every single time. It's like when I first, had a couple of tendons rip off my arm because of an arm bar. It took 3 months to feel better, and then it was shorter, and then it was shorter. And now, I mean, I can hyperextend something, and I'm really not that worried about it. I know it's going to be bad for maybe a few days, but determining exactly where that pain is and using these simple techniques, you can really overcome that. You can really heal it, essentially, help your body strengthen everything around it and heal it so much quicker, mind-blowingly quicker, that it's going to keep you in the game.
Miles, you're way ahead of me on things. I don't want anything hyperextended. I don't want anything going past the range of motion. That's just crazy.
I don't want that either. Yeah, it happens though, right? I mean, it happens on accident.
Yeah, for me, and this is a whole different way that I've dealt with injuries, and it's same as you. Injury avoidance is the biggest thing. But Definitely. It's not these, like you have these techniques, which I'm really excited to start trying these and seeing how they work. But my biggest thing that I've done in jiu-jitsu to avoid injuries in the past 10 years is to take responsibility for my own injuries. That's
how
it.
Do you mean?
Well, if we're rolling and you armbar me and my arm snaps, that's my fault. You
know what, that is absolutely something that we need to learn right out of the gate, isn't it? I mean, that's huge. Yeah.
It goes from like, did you realize that I'm the type of person who doesn't want to get injured? Like, some people are a little more reckless than others. I tap pretty early, like Kimuras. If you get me, you go north south, you lock up my arm, and I will tap before my grip breaks. I will like.
That's right.
I think Kimuras are pretty dangerous, but I'm a pretty safety oriented guy, and part of my responsibility to train safely is to tell people or to not put myself in those situations. But if I think you're injury prone, like I'll tell you, hey man, I'm working on some stuff. I really don't want to get injured. I have to go to work tomorrow or whatever, and I need to be able to do that. That's important for me. And so just letting that person know, and then protecting myself during the match, or not during the match, but during training, and having all this is just. If I get injured, it's always my fault. How could I have avoided it? And that has been a big one for me. Totally different than your approach, which is I'm really interested in starting to try this, is strengthening those joints. And really I can look at that as my fault too. Like, I haven't strengthened my joints. I haven't done these things to make my body more resilient to getting injured.
Well, but wait though, I share your same approach. So when I tap with everything. I yell out. And I tap before it hurts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've had training partners often be scared after they tap me because they're like, "Are you okay?" Because I tap so intensely. But I think that's a huge thing for especially new people to remember, that when you tap, you make sure the other guy knows it, and don't feel verbal taps are good. If your hands are caught up, or I don't do I never tap the mat, because what point, they might not hear it,
Yeah.
So I'm always tapping them. I'll tap their face if I have to, right? Make sure they're aware. But I do yell out too.
That's to me, that's a basic thing about training jiu-jitsu. If it happens sometimes, somebody will come in and present themselves like they know a little bit more jiu-jitsu than they actually do. And one of the big red flags is they don't know how to tap out properly. Like, or they do like the soft tap, or they really hesitate. It's like, that's not acceptable. Like, I always talk with that person like, hey man, tapping is the way that you remain safe doing this. You need to really let me know, because if typically, at black belt level, if you're working with somebody who's that new, you're expecting them to tap, so you kind of slow things down. But if white belt versus white belt, or even a blue belt, they're going pretty hard on these submissions. They may not feel that subtle little tap that they're trying to like admit defeat, but not really wanting to. Like, tap with intention. You're trying to preserve your own body.
And I don't know if you can always help it, because I got the amazing good fortune to roll with Machado about a year ago.
Yeah,
which was so I got invited to the gym by a friend of mine, Jean-Jacques Machado's, and I got to go through his class, and he was teaching class. And this was the first time I'd been there. And let me tell you what, he was everything that you would think he would be, because the moment I was at the desk, he happened to come in, and Joey was my friend. And I said, "Oh, I'm a friend of Joey's." And he was like, "Oh, you're a friend of Joey's? You're a friend of mine." And he gives me a big hug. I'm like, "Oh my God, this is going to be great." And so we're through with the class, and I just wanted to grab a picture of him. I mean, Jean-Jacques is a legend, right? And I go up to him and I say, hey, you don't mind if I get a picture of you? And he had seen me roll a bunch with a bunch of his guys. And he was like, put it away, put the camera away. We're going to roll. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. And so I hand my camera to my phone to somebody sitting there. I'm like, hey, mind, take a couple shots of it. And so we're rolling, and he's armbarring me left and right. I mean, he armbars me like probably 3 times. And on one of the armbars, he had me in such a unique position that he hyperextended my arm. He popped the tendon on me. And the person taking the picture happened to grab the photo, and I'm literally doing a headstand. He's got me like, he somehow rolled me around, and I'm doing a headstand while he's armbarring me. You can see him like letting go in the picture, but it was too late. But amazing. Of course, he's the master of feeling how to extend, and it just happens. You can't always prevent it.
Yeah.
But it ended up being a really cool roll, because it was only 5 minutes. But after he tapped me out a few times, I was able. He became more comfortable, and I got a pretty good sweep on him. And I swept him, and then the class kind of like gasped, and some gal yelled out, "Oh, that's a good sweep!" And then he realized too. The way I roll is I like to keep a millimeter in between myself and my partner. Right now, like I really try and flow as much as possible and feel what they're doing. I rarely put pressure, and I think he realized that at that time. And then so he got to sweep me back, and then I swept him back, and then he swept me back, and we kind of like it turned into just an amazing roll at the end, and everyone was really excited, and you could hear everyone was sort of following along. You could hear the class following along on our movements and stuff, and pretty unique experience. But again, you can't always help it. Those injuries happen, and I suppose that might have been my fault. But I was doing a headstand. I mean, what do you want me to do?
Yeah. And just for me, I having never been in this situation, and that sounds like a crazy thing, but like, if somebody armbars me like hard in the first minute or so, I will tell him, "Hey man, I gotta go to work in the morning," or like, "Hey, I'm not trying to get yeah, you're kicking my butt," but I always I don't know. It's different when it's a celebrity of jiu-jitsu, but
that's right. If anyone, I was proud actually that my arm hurt for a week. Like, ask me why my arm hurts. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So, what got you started way back then in jiu-jitsu or martial arts before it was really a thing?
No kidding. It was probably, what got a lot of people was the UFC, right? I used to sit around in high school with my buddies, and we'd watch the UFC, and we might have some beers, and then we would take it out back. We would take it out back, and we would try and submit each other in the grass, and then once somebody got kicked in the pills, we would go back inside,
That's a good cutoff point, I think.
That's right. You're like, okay, I've had enough, and it was really good. And then I ended up moving. I went to college, the College of Charleston, South Carolina, and I met. I credit him a lot for the beginning of my jiu-jitsu career, which was Master Jerry Brewer, out of Charleston, South Carolina. He was under Helson Gracie. And he was everything that you would want in a martial arts instructor. I mean, he was humble. He was an absolute beast at the same time, and real enthusiastic about teaching. And so we started doing tournaments back then. And there weren't gi tournaments, right? It was just no gi or whatever pants that you could, whatever shorts you could find, because even grappling gear was hard to come by.
Yeah.
And neck cranks were legal in the beginners. So it went 0 to 6 months, 6 months to 2 years, and 2 years and above. That was the 3 categories, and anyone was invited. So Navy SEALs, anyone that wanted to come in and see if they could submit somebody, come on, bring it on. And jiu-jitsu, of course, would conquer all other forms of grappling, which was fun to be a part of the winning side. And I have a great old video of me doing well in the tournament, and then and trying to neck crank this guy, and I'm neck cranking him so hard that my own feet are trembling, and he didn't tap out, but it was what a fun time it was, and a very intense sport it was at the time, and underground. I mean, nobody was doing it for any other reasons other than sort of test your own spirit, and that was the beginning. And I stuck around with Helson's guys until I went to Phil Milgaris in Balance Jiu-Jitsu in Philadelphia, and he's also under Helson. And that's such a great style, the old school Gracie style, where you never give up position for any reason. I mean, it's just a grind all the way to the top, and it's very effective. We talk about that, what the difference between sport and non-sport and self-defense, and I never thought there was a difference, but I think what people should be trying to create is just an autopilot. Like, what are you going to do when you get clocked in the head, and what is your body just going to naturally do when you don't even remember what happened? I just think that's what we're trying to create in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, you kind of work that way with just training and getting better. Like, if you're having to think about everything you do, you're very slow.
Yeah, that's right.
We want to add techniques which do require thinking, but really, if you're working on, like, let's just say you mentioned butterfly guard. If you're working on guillotine from butterfly guard, your body is maintaining butterfly guard, preventing the pass, keeping me off balance, whatever, while you're trying to figure out, okay, now trap his head here or do this. So there's still like a lot of processing power working under the lines of I'm working for a guillotine. But really, if you were just a regular guy working guillotine and you forgot all your butterfly guard stuff, the person would just slice right through the butterfly guard and there'd be nothing there. But
that's right.
Like, you have to. That's why it takes a long time sometimes, because we're building these systems that work on autopilot. So then when we learn new things, we're building on that framework.
Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of considered it all one big autopilot, but you bring up the point that it's like a series of autopilot situations that you're setting up. That's a really good point. I'm gonna think about that more and probably incorporate that. Like, so this is when this happens, this is your autopilot. This is what you want to do, and then otherwise, when this happens, this is something else. That's a good point.
And having a good autopilot makes it easier to learn things because you're able to rely on that to keep you where you want to be.
Yeah, that's it, man. Just being able to stack all this stuff up. It is so much to learn. That's why we didn't really talk about it yet, but the breathing, exercises, and the breathing into jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is so complicated as it is. So in order to progress your jiu-jitsu and while you're rolling hard, there are a few breathing techniques that you can use, and it's very minimal. I mean, the stuff that we incorporate, the breathing portions that we incorporate are so minimal, but because you can't think about you can't really think about your breathing while you're doing jiu-jitsu, or at least you can't give a lot of time to it. You got to be able to just, okay, I'm going to breathe this way, or this way. We have 3 breathing patterns that we use, and that's it. And then we just sort of switch in between them. But that's a pretty big, addition to this already massively complex system that we're trying to put together, and the autopilots we're putting together.
Yeah, and Miles, you kind of have a unique background with the breathing and that sort of exercise. Tell us a little bit about how you got into that.
Yeah, so I'm a certified Wim Hof method instructor. I started it back in October 30th, 2015. And I remember the date because that was the day that Wim Hof got on Rogan's podcast for the first time. And he's very open about sharing his method because it's so simple and it's a natural thing that we can all do easily. And when I tried the Wim Hof method that day, it was so effective for me. I happen to have a low lung capacity. So cardio, running, all these things, I would get like running cramps. Have you ever gotten a cramp when you're trying to exert yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I would get those pretty bad, and I didn't know how to overcome them. Coaches just tell you, run through it or something like that. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And so they were super, they were just devastating to me. And so, and I think that's why, is because of my low lung capacity. So when I tried these things, the Wim Hof method it was just massively effective. And you don't know it, but all of us can hold our breath for 4 times longer than we normally do in our day-to-day. So on average, most people can hold their breath about 30 seconds. And did you know that with a simple breathing exercise beforehand, that you could hold your breath for 2 minutes, that you can today. I could teach you how to hold your breath for 2 minutes probably without issue easily. And just that little piece of information, well, I feel like that's something that we should have been taught when we were kids almost. I mean, that is a valuable piece of information that hasn't been shared through in our society, in our culture. So once I started the Wim Hof method, I was off and running, and I did some workshops in the area. When he came, I met him, and then I decided to take the instructor route. And once I did, man, it really opened up a lot of interesting doors for myself physiologically. I mean, it's basically like a mechanical. Laird Hamilton describes it as a mechanical meditation. So if you've ever meditated, do you meditate at all, Brian?
Yeah, I try. I'm
yeah.
I get a couple in. It seems like a week.
No, so let me wonder what happens. So you meditate sometimes, and sometimes you have a great meditation, and sometimes you can barely keep your attention span on it.
Yeah,
right?
my mind's all over the place, or sometimes it's I'm able to really like focus on breathing or just not really control my breathing, but just watch it. And sometimes it's like I'm thinking about what's going to be for lunch or what's going to happen tomorrow, who am I going to interview, and it's like I get done with it, it's like that didn't help.
That's right. So I was in the same boat. I liked meditating because every once in a while I would get a good one in, and then it was kind of like chasing the dragon after that. I never could, I would just do it. I would get a good one in every once in a while. But what's neat about the Wim Hof method is it's mechanical. You follow these steps and you will get in a deep meditation, period. It's like you don't have a choice. We make chemical changes in your body. You make them almost instantaneously using several different breathing patterns and breath holds. And it is really neat. And so now once you learn how to meditate, well, you get into a weird space where you start getting in touch with the things that are happening in your body a little bit better. So you get in touch with how adrenaline is getting released in your body. You get in touch with how blood flow is changing in your body. All because you're just able to stay silent for 2 minutes with nothing to do. And then these things start happening. You start to feel these things better. So it's pretty. I'll tell you a fun story. I went to one of Hickson's seminars, which is, to me, he's the king, right? I mean, it was amazing to even be able to go. And I wasn't quite a certified instructor yet, but I was already pretty far. I was in the advanced stages of it. And I get to the seminar, and there's Hickson. As soon as I walk in, he's on the mat by himself, and he looks at me. And like, oh my God, just him looking at me made me so nervous. And I looked down and I didn't know, and I felt bad for looking down. I'm like, why, what just happened? Why did he, it was a very fun experience. And so we're warming up for the seminar and he's sitting there by himself and everyone's pretty quiet. And so I said, this is my chance. And I go, I'm most excited about his breathing techniques because, we've all seen Choke. I imagine everyone who's done jiu-jitsu has seen the movie Choke. I think
it's free on YouTube. Like just type in the word Choke documentary and Hickson and it pops right up. And yeah, there's some crazy looking breathing exercises in there.
Yeah. And so I was really interested to see how, and I had seen that too, but it's tough from that video or from things he said. He's not videotaped that much. It's tough to know exactly what he's doing or how, what are the benefits. And this was my opportunity. So I get to ask him. I go over to him, Master Hickson. It's so nice for you to be here. I'm happy to be here. And I ask him about the breathing. And then I ask him about the Wim Hof method. He knows about the Wim Hof method, and he tells a fun story about how Kron started doing the Wim Hof method and started the 10-week. There was a 10-week course, was the original course, and he said that he passed out twice. And wow. He said, yeah, and he said that Kron said that he likes his breathing methods better. He likes his own breathing methods better. And Hickson started laughing, and he said, your breathing methods? He was like, those are my breathing methods that I taught you. So that was a fun story. But then as I'm talking to him about it, I asked him about it later, even afterwards. So we had a good 20-minute conversation about breathing, and he's showing me how he's doing it. And then he also went into about a half hour of the breathing, the stomach exercises that he does, of course, that he's famous for. And all this stuff in the beginning of the seminar. And then I asked him about it afterwards. And so his is basically giving him similar benefits, which is being able to recover, being able to withstand, being able to get in a really deep meditation, all these very similar benefits. but the breathing is completely different. It is completely different. And I asked him, like, well, what do you think of the Wim Hof stuff? And he's like, exactly what I said. He's like, well, it's different. He's like, it's good. That's awesome. He's a great guy. And these guys Wim Hof and Rickson Gracie are like parallel entities. I mean, they have like these parallel lives where they're doing similar kind of crazy extreme things. And they're attributing a lot of it to meditation and breathing, their focus, you know? And so after studying the Rickson's breathing methods more, and then one of the jiu-jitsu sites did a video of his seminar, which was neat. And I started to compare the two. And then I started to find similarities. I finally found a similarity between the Wim Hof method and Rickson's method. And then, oh my God, the light bulb went on, and I started to use that and figured out, using Rickson's, using Wim Hof's, figured out these ways to breathe during jiu-jitsu. So you don't even have to practice these things. You learn these things. You can apply these 3 breathing methods during jiu-jitsu, and they are so effective that the difference is night and day.
Wow. And is there, I know the answer to this, but is there a way that we can learn these from you?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm happy to share these things for free on to anyone who's listening, because it's so, I feel like these are really natural things that we should have learned when we were kids. And so I share them on YouTube, and I share them on Instagram or whatever. YouTube's probably the best way to go get them. And I am putting out, I'm finishing up a book, a small little ebook with, again, the way I like it is just the principles. Don't give me any of the fluff. I just want principles that I can follow, that I can apply immediately and see changes. So this little ebook's going to have that in there, and people will be able to pick that up. All my stuff's on Breath.fitness.
Okay.
So instead of .com, everyone can just go to Breath.fitness, and then that kind of, they can figure out, YouTube is probably the best way to learn some of these things. But man, yeah, you can tell I'm pretty excited about it, just because it's so I use those same breath patterns for the exercises, those warm-up exercises. So if you could do a 30-second push-up, I would wager that you could probably do a 1-minute push-up using this breath pattern, or these 3 breath patterns.
Interesting.
Because the first one, the Wim Hof method, it charges you up. It gives you a bunch of energy. It lowers your CO2 and raises your oxygen. So that's the one that's going to be able to allow you to hold your breath longer if you need to. And Byron, I don't know about you, but when I'm trying to sweep some big giant, I hold my breath. I mean, you shouldn't, but naturally we do, right? So that's very useful to do in the beginning of a roll, right before you roll or in the beginning of a roll. And then there's another one that mixes up sort of both of them that you can do while you're rolling. And then Rickson uses a recovery style breath. His is pretty interesting, because if you breathe all the way out, then breathe all the way out, like push all that air out, then it's air pressure that brings air back in. So the neat thing is that you're only using energy to push air out. And that's what he talks about, and what he says is super effective when you are getting a big carbon dioxide overload, because you're exerting more than you're breathing.
It's to blow it out, and then the atmospheric pressure just fills your lungs back up.
Right. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, it's just the pressure. It's air pressure. So instead of when we breathe, we use 2 processes. We use an expansion process and a contraction process. And let's say it's probably not 2 muscles, but you use the muscles in 2 different ways. So in Rickson's recovery method, you push out, and all you're using is contraction. You're only using essentially you're only using one process to breathe, which it might be twice as efficient as opposed to breathing, using full expansion and contraction while you're breathing, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and that was the underlying principle that I found that transcends these 2 methods. So in Wim Hof's breathing, and this power breathing that he does, you only use expansion. So you breathe all the way in, you let go, and then when you let go, you get to a neutral point in your lungs. So you still have air in there, but there's no air pressure one way or another. And so you just keep, in this case, in the power breathing, you only use expansion. So you're only using one process to breathe. So again, you're doing some different things chemically, but you're still twice as efficient, right? Because you're only using that one process instead of both.
Wow, that's interesting. And I urge people to check that. What's the site again?
Breath.fitness.
Breath.fitness. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And
cool.
And
I hope that's not was that too complex of an explanation on that?
I think that's enough to make it sound interesting. And you're able to do this while you're actually training, and you get, like, the simple thing is, if I could do a 30-second push-up and then I breathe this way, I could do a minute-long push-up. You could just imagine that effect on your jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's pretty interesting how, when we control our breath, how much more we can do. I mean, we're really controlling the body chemicals. We're really controlling the chemicals in our body and in our brain. I mean, we say in the Wim Hof groups that, man, controlling your brain used to be like an old analog TV where you're pumping the knob, click, click, click. And it was a lot of work to control your brain, to control your emotions, to control all these things. But now we have the remote control to your brain, and it's through breathing. And you can make your brain essentially change emotions, change different levels using just sort of automatic breathing techniques. And once you get started, man, you can see I've sort of fell in the wormhole of trying to discover more. But it is a really neat endeavor, and it doesn't have to be very complex. That's the best thing. It can be as simple as it gets, and just apply these things, and then if they work for you, that'd be awesome. I'd love for people to let me know if they work for them, and if they don't, then I can't imagine. Nobody's come back and said, you know what, none of this stuff working.
Yeah.
So
it's a layer of jiu-jitsu that we often don't think about. I mean, we're thinking about different passes and maybe our strength and conditioning and maybe our diet, but a lot of times breathing, which is something that you do constantly while you're grappling. You do it constantly while you're alive.
Yeah.
It has an effect on things, and it's just not being looked at.
No, not enough. And it's super effective. That one breathing pattern that we're familiar with, probably, where you stagger your breath and you go, when you breathe out, you go. That's sort of been taught by the Gracies, and you'll even see Hodger Gracie do it when he's competing. Or I was a member of his online school for a bit, and you'll see him do it, and you'll see these guys do it. But it's almost like breathing and warming up is sort of the boring part, and so we want to get to the more interesting part. But man, if you get these things down, now all of a sudden the more interesting part is even more interesting, because you can sustain mental clarity for so much longer, and learn more and apply more. And so, yeah, you can tell I'm pretty pumped about it. But so we teach breathing classes just for jiu-jitsu, which is it's neat because nobody needs it more than a jiu-jitsu guy. I think that's like because again, it's one of the hardest endeavors you can partake in, really, right?
Yeah, and that's just another element you could tip into your favor.
Yeah, definitely.
Miles, you've also done some Fight to Wins. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Listen, the Fight to Wins are such an amazing event. I don't know if people know this, but Seth, the promoter, the owner, he used to be a rock show promoter, and so he had all the gear from rock shows. So he had crazy lights, smoke, lasers, all this stuff, and then decided to do jiu-jitsu shows. And honestly, I don't even know if jiu-jitsu is worthy of how good of a show this is, because it is unbelievable. I mean, you're walking down the walkout through the smoke and lasers. The sound system is rattling everything, and it's just there's very little like this experience. So you walk out and you see your friends on the crowd, and everybody's right up to the corner of the mats. And it's a really amazing test of your psyche, right? Of your nerves, of your adrenaline control. And adrenaline control is, again, something that we talk about a lot in the Wim Hof method and learn how to control. So if you want to test your adrenaline control, you do a Fight to Win. because there's nothing that's going to shoot your adrenaline up higher than coming through that smoke and seeing your friends and all the lasers and everything like that. And then it's really neat too, is that I got to, I've done a couple of them, which were great. And then I also got to ref one recently. And when I was reffing, I get to, it's a different perspective, and I get to see people coming out, and I'm opposite of them. And I even got to, one of the best ones was the 700 pounds of black belt action, two of these big 350-pound guys.
Man,
that I was, yes, it was thundering. They saved the craziest music for that one because you can barely see. I mean, it's just like strobe lights, and these guys are coming out. And what I noticed on a lot of people's faces is how nervous they were. It is so nerve-wracking, and you can't help it. Even if you're telling yourself this is just one match, this isn't like a tournament where I'm going to have to do a bunch of matches or anything. I mean, it is like a forced situation where you really have to deal with something inside yourself. And I can't speak high enough about that promotion. I think it's the one of the coolest things you can do. And the neat thing too is that it's open for everybody. I mean, any one of you guys could sign up, and as long as they can get you a match, then you're good to go. And you help sell a few of the tickets. And so if you have some friends at the gym, whatever, it's a really a neat thing that for everyone involved. And then the fans, of course, everybody who's there, they have great food, they have beer and drinks and cool stuff. And nobody leaves those. People are always asking me when the next ones are. And they're not even jiu-jitsu people. They're just friends. So that's I encourage everyone to make that a goal, especially if you do get nervous doing jiu-jitsu, or if you have trouble with nerves. This is one of the best tests that any of us can do. For instance, Byron, how when you compete, have you had that feeling where you lost your strength? You're like, man, I don't have strength anymore. I have that before I get out there sometimes, right?
Yeah, it's been quite a while since I've competed, but yeah, I remember just not feeling like I had it, or maybe that adrenaline dump after the first match, like my hands are numb.
That's right. It's that adrenaline control is an amazing thing, because I have that where I have zero strength, or I used to have this. I have zero strength. I have no spit left in my mouth. My mouth guard is like glued to my teeth, and there's nothing. It's completely dry in there, and there's all those things are things you control using breathing techniques.
Yeah,
which is really neat. To bring it back to the Wim Hof method, you learn how to do some adrenaline control beforehand. I spend a full hour beforehand meditating right before the match, about 15 minutes before the match. I go off and find my own corner. And then all of a sudden, that adrenaline dump, what happens is we bring our adrenaline up higher, using the Wim Hof method. You bring your adrenaline up higher than you would when you get some symptoms of anxiety, and then your adrenaline has to raise up to meet those symptoms. Instead, you bring your adrenaline up beforehand, and now you don't get those symptoms. So now you're standing up on the stage, and you're looking at all your friends. Everything's crystal clear. You're not nervous. You're not. Your mouth's not dry. None of your, you have all your strength. And man, that is the Wim Hof method. You can use this for something like that. You can use it for if you have to give a speech. You can use it for anything that gives you some sort of anxiety. Man, that stuff is very controllable. You just need some time beforehand to address it. So go do the fight to win, everybody.
Man, that's awesome. Miles, we talked about a lot. We had other stuff to talk about, but what's the best way someone can get a hold of you if they have questions about this, or questions about their own personal journey in jiu-jitsu, or questions about breathing, or really anything?
Yeah, thanks, Byron. The Breath.fitness. That's my personal site, and it's real basic, but you can reach out to any of my social medias on there, and definitely I like to respond and talk about this stuff, and I'm growing. I'd like to build or grow more of a community around this stuff, and we explore more, because a lot of it's experimentation. And with the breathing, I'm just as excited about the joint strength improvement, because that's not, I haven't seen anyone offer it like this. Not offer it, but I haven't seen anyone sort of put it together like this. And jiu-jitsu is such an amazing training ground for joint strength. I don't know what else would be better. So it's really nice to see people's feedback on if the stuff is working for them. yeah, I encourage anyone to reach out and say hi.
Yeah, that's awesome. Miles, do you have any final thoughts or words you'd like to leave with the audience?
No, I love, again, how you guys talk about the journey and from the beginning. And I think that once you overcome that, the hill to get over, to stick with jiu-jitsu is not that big. I think that once you get above the hill, it's more downhill from there. And I would say even it becomes so much once you start jiu-jitsu and you're a white belt and you're a punching bag the first couple of months or whatever. And then when the new crop of guys come in the door, and you're going to see one of those guys coming in the door that you've never met before, and you're going to think, man, I'm going to get that guy. And then all of a sudden you're not the guy on the bottom anymore. And you become, you're the guy on top, and you start catching people. And then I think, man, if you catch a few people and you're able to learn how to, a little bit about nutrition, definitely a lot about joint strengthening and repair, then it's downhill from there. Then it's just fun. Then you're just going to have fun the rest of the journey. And I certainly hope to do this until till I'm in the grave. I hope to be like Helio Gracie back, 100 years old doing this. And I think it's just such an important endeavor for everyone to learn ego manipulation and how to be stronger and be smarter. So you stick with it, my friends.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miles.
Yeah, Byron, my pleasure, man. Thanks. I really like what you guys are doing. You guys keep up the good work.
I want to thank Miles for hopping on the show. Go check out his stuff on breathing and grappling. It seems so simple, and I see it when people are failing to do it, at all correctly. Like when somebody's basically grappling and hyperventilating, I key on that. I'm like, this person needs to slow down and take some deep breaths. But I need to take that to the next level and purposely breathe in a way that gives me more energy. And like he's describing, being able to do things, perform better by breathing better. And I think that'd be a fun way to take that up a notch, because I haven't really dealt with anything with that. I don't hyperventilate when I roll. I'm not breathing super heavy like you do when you first start out and it feels like someone's trying to kill you, and you get kind of adrenaline rush for no reason, and you start losing control of your ability to control your breathing. But I think we would all benefit from having some purposeful breathing while we train, and then off the mat training with your breathing to help you recover and to get into a kind of that zone that you're looking for. So thanks, Miles, for hopping on the show. We appreciate having you here. If this is something that you think a friend would share the episode with them, and hopefully they'll be able to gain some value and learn from Miles as well.
Yeah, and Byron, you were talking about that, sharing it and gain some value. We have article of the week this week, The Value of All Your Teammates, written by the one, the only, Joe Thomas. Joe, let's have you talk about your article.
Well, writing articles is getting easier these days. I just
what chapter are you on?
I just make a Facebook post and Byron turns it into an article. So
yeah, that's literally. I open my phone up, I read Joe's Facebook post on BJJ Brick Facebook page. I'm like, that's an article. I copied and pasted it right into our thing. So Joe, amazing job with our social media stuff on Facebook. And I didn't mean to steal it from you, but I was just, when I saw that, I was just so impressed by what you had pointed out here.
Well, I just want to say that sometimes I feel like I'm giving myself too much credit when we say these are articles. This is more of just a blog post, but it's just an idea that I think is valid. And Byron, I appreciate that you liked it as well. We think of iron sharpens iron. That's one of my favorite quotes. And I think everybody that does jiu-jitsu has this sort of idea that I really get good when I'm in those really tough training sessions with, my friends, my training partners that I have really competitive roles with. And it's that hard training, that hard grinding that makes me better. Iron sharpens iron. And there's definitely some truth to that. But what I pointed out in this little Facebook post was that leather also sharpens iron. You see somebody sharpen a razor blade and they're putting it on a leather strap, and a stone wheel is oftentimes what's used to sharpen axes, and these materials are much softer than iron, yet they still sharpen iron. And so you think about how that relates to jiu-jitsu, and it's sometimes when you're rolling with a lower belt that you have the opportunity to really get good. And Byron and Gary, I'm going to let you guys speak to that a little bit. I'm going to just do a little twist on this, and I'm going to say that it's also a two-way street. And I'm often in the position where I'm the less skilled grappler, and I know that sometimes my training partners are doing things that are helping them get better, which are also allowing the roll to be more competitive. But we both have to learn how to roll within that context so that we both get better. And I just want to say that as a lower belt, there's some things that you can do to make that happen, and there's things that you can do to make that stop. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of them. And one is, it's easy to get maybe almost a little offended when you start to get the idea that your opponent's just giving you things. You know, you're like, I know I only got that guard pass because he let me, and, you know, I don't need your sympathy or whatever. They're not doing it out of pity. So you got to get over that, and you got to take the opportunities when they come. I've got a couple of coaches that there's no way I'm mounting any offense unless they let me. But when they let me, I can't get my panties in a wad because I'm offended that they're showing me sympathy or whatever. I've got to take that opportunity, and I've got to roll with it. And that's how we both get better in the role. The other thing I see white belts doing often is when the upper belt gives them an opportunity, they get this look in their eyes like, this is my chance, and it's all of a sudden full-on wounded cougar mode, and they're scratching and clawing. And, you know, if you're rolling with an upper belt and you get a glimpse of his back and you just do everything you can to get there, including fish hooks and, you know, eye gouges, and he's not going to give you that opportunity again later. So as a lower belt, when you're in this situation, there's things that you can do to facilitate it. You guys, you're both usually the more experienced grapplers, so I'll let you speak to getting the most out of a roll when you roll with lesser experienced guys.
I just want to say, Joe, you don't want to get your panties in a wad. You do what you want, you know, like that's your own personal situation. No judgment here, my man. So however you want to keep them, that's fine.
Yeah, when you were talking about that, you know, I was eating a sandwich and I threw up mildly. So, yeah, I try not to think about that. But, Joe, I have to say I never really read your article quotes. And I've heard this many times, iron sharpens iron. And I always said, hey, I think that's great. But I never thought about where you took that. And, you know, as you were talking about it, you know, the leather strap, stone wheel, in reality, many things sharpen an axe. And I was like, oh, man, that is brilliant. Wait, I'm stopping right here. Joe, you won the internet again this week. So,
yes.
Yeah. Funny, Byron never wins it, but Joe wins almost every week.
How do you win? What part of the article gets the win? Is it the title?
It's the.
Is it the graphic?
It's saying iron sharpens iron isn't just the truth. You know, the leather strap will also work, and but this is so true. I mean, you think how many times you roll, like you said, Joe, if you're rolling with one of your instructors, but. You know, I really like rolling with lower ranked people, and you know, I like to give positions. And when I try to give a position, I try not to. You know, you were talking about Joe, though. You got to, you know, some people get their panties in a wad if they realize you gave them the position. I try to almost make it like I didn't give you the position. I try to pretend like I make a mistake and get put in there, you know, for that reason. But you know, I just love it too. I'm getting in positions that I'm not in every day. You know, I like to, you know, lately I've been liking to get caught in an arm bar and seeing if I can hitchhike or escape out of it. You know, it's really helping me on that. And I don't know, I just really love that, trying different things that, you know, I may not be good at. And it makes my game so much better. I mean, sometimes I think that, you know, going against a lesser person makes my game better. You know, I'm not as much, you know, going for the win. You know, Byron, you always say, you know, you want to have people better than you, people the same as you, and people lower than you. And, maybe just because of my age now and I'm not as fast and, I'm really trying to learn a lot more instead of just winning. But I really like rolling against people who haven't been training as long as me. And, I love it when they tap me out. And I've just learned so much from rolling with people who haven't been doing it as long.
Part of this post here, Joe says, value your lower ranked and less experienced training partners. They too can sharpen your game. Just think of your training and how much time you spend with training partners who are less skilled than you. And it might be hardly any time at all, or it might be most of the time. And if you're a brown or a black belt, it probably is. The majority of your time is spent with people who are not the same skill level as you. If you can make that time valuable to you as well as valuable to them, that's going to accelerate your learning significantly. So if I've been working a lot on my back attacks and taking the back and finishing and controlling from the back, and really my game has jumped up quite a bit. But if I were to do this just with black belts, I would roll 5 minutes with the black belt and maybe get a minute, 30 seconds, in that range of back time, if at all. Maybe I get my guard pass and I get smashed the whole 5 minutes and don't get any action on my back attacks at all this time. But, I grab a white belt, I can get to the back on pretty much most white belts and spend some time there and work on some techniques from there. I'm trying to not, finish right away. I want to check a few things off the list before I, get to the submission or to see how somebody reacts. Blue belts, I could probably get to someone's back if they're a blue belt without a whole lot of trouble. Purple belts are going to fight a lot better, and it's going to I'm going to have to execute my back takes a lot more efficiently and have much more timing with those. And as the list as you go up the chain, it becomes much more difficult. But if I want to get 5 minutes of rolling and get several minutes of working on someone's back, they're not going to be a black belt. That's just not going to happen. They're going to escape, or I won't even get their back. And so that's just one example of how you could do that. So if you find yourself as the highest ranked person in the room and you're not getting any value of training with your lower ranked training partners, your jiu-jitsu is really kind of stagnating. You need to find ways to gain value. It might just be you work on your escapes more often. I really like getting a white belt that's almost almost blue is the order that goes, or a blue belt, and just getting right into their A game. Like they've got a really good, spider guard. Let's just get in that spider guard and see what happens. And if I could, stop from getting swept or stop from getting triangled or something like that, that's fun. If it was a black belt, I wade right to their A game. It's game over, which is also okay. But it's you shouldn't, if you're upper level belt or have a significant skill, you shouldn't be avoiding their best parts of their game. You should be getting into that, helping them develop that a little bit more, giving them some tips, and also helps you because. Good blue belts have really good parts of their games that should give you some run and push you a little bit. So it's really up to you if you're not learning something with grappling with a less experienced person.
Yeah, and we know it's possible to get really good while rolling with only people less experienced than you because, sure, the guys that generally win the biggest tournaments on the biggest stages, they belong to big teams and they have really high caliber, training groups. But you also see a lot of brown and black belts who come from small towns and, like my instructor, both of them actually, they may go weeks without getting to train with another black belt. And they still are getting better at jiu-jitsu. They do well at tournaments, so it's possible to do it and the proof is there. So, yeah. The other thing I would add real quick, if you are a purple belt somewhere or a brown belt and you're getting one roll with your coach that's a challenging roll, and then pretty much you're rolling with a lot of blue belts and white belts. I know an audio book that can help you kind of figure some of this out. It's called 6 Games for BJJ. Just to get back to that, that really is a great tool. If you're having a hard time figuring out how to get better rolling with people that are significantly less experienced than you, playing some of those types of games will help.
Joe, I just want to go off the title. In there's the value. We also have team, and we have teammates. And, we're talking about, all different skill levels in your gym. Basically, the thing is we want to make our team. We want to value our team. We want to move our team up the ladder. Everybody's helping everybody out. So sometimes you're going to be going against the better person and you're going to be surviving and working your defense. Sometimes you're going to be the more experienced person and you're going to put yourself in position so the other person can work too. I mean, I can just take the person who's my teammate and not value them and just smash them all the time and, just give them a sore neck every time after rolling. Or I can smash them some so they get a little bit of that. I can lighten the pressure up and let that person work to work on their offense, to work on their positioning, to work on being stable in a top position. And I can work on my submission defenses. So it's all about your teammates. It's all about your team getting better, the value you place there. And this is a great article written by Joe. But I just love the name value. And when I think of value, I think about we all want good value. And where can we get some great value? And in my opinion, the best value you're going to find is June 14th through June 16th, the BJJ Brick second annual event. Fox Fitness, foxfitnessbjj.com. Check out the website. Shamir Chantre, Gina Franson are both going to be doing seminars. Friday night is open mat. Saturday is the meat and potatoes. Shamir and Gina are going to have a seminar. They have both been to Wichita before. They both give incredible seminars, learned a lot from them. And then Sunday, it's going to be the BJJ Brick crew. But if you want value, get to Wichita, Kansas this summer and have a good time. Chokes and jokes.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you guys again. Those of you who made it last time, and if you'd like to come and train with us and have some good times in the mats, you can do that really anytime you're near Joe or in the Wichita area. Joe's just south of Houston, near Lake Jackson. Is that right, Joe?
That's correct.
You guys are welcome anytime. Joe travels quite a bit, but if you're in one of those areas, send us a message, and if we can train with you, we will. But this is more of an organized thing where we like to see you guys and train as a group and get a lot of good mat time. Really excited about the BJJ Brick event. Had a great time last year, and it's been one of the things I've been looking forward to all year, getting back to this and getting to see our podcast friends again on the mats. So that's really something that I look forward to, and I can't thank Jake Fox from Fox Fitness enough for helping organize it. Man, he's been great. We'll undoubtedly see some of our biggest fans and most loyal listeners at the BJJ Brick event. But also, if you go and look at Patreon, we have a Patreon page. It'll be in the show notes. Some of our biggest supporters are on there. And what they've done is they listen to the show and they think, man, I like to support these guys making this podcast and help out a little bit financially. If you could afford to do that, that'd be great. And our newest supporter is Caleb. Caleb, thank you so much for joining the Patreon support team. You've already got your gi patch and sticker in the mail, and invite you to join our private Facebook group. So just send me a message on the best way. Send me your Facebook profile link to bjjbrick@gmail.com, and I'll get you added in there, and we'd like to have you in that private group. We have a lot of fun discussions amongst Patreon supporters and ourselves, the crew, in the private group. So, guys, thanks so much for the Patreon support. You guys know who you are, but I just want to welcome Caleb in to the support team there. Thank you so much.
You think about it. This podcast, it's free, and, Patreon supporters really help us. And, I mentioned earlier that we were ranked the second-ranked podcast in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or martial arts podcast in the nation. And, we started this at the bottom, and it's like, how do we get off the bottom? We got off the bottom because of our Patreon supporters. And that actually reminds me of a question that we got sent to us. If you have a question, send it to bjjbrick@gmail.com. But one of our listeners sent us a question. I am pretty new and sweeps are difficult. How do I get off the bottom? Joe, any suggestions?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is Yes, sweeps are difficult, but you just got to learn them. I mean, sometimes I think the technical stand-up is underutilized to get back on top. Sometimes there's just enough space that you can use that. But the reality is jiu-jitsu is all about being able to go from a bad position to a dominant position. And so while sweeps are difficult, you need to keep working on them. If it's just if the context of the question is just that it's discouraging to always be on the bottom and you don't have good sweeps and you spend every round on the bottom, you can always ask your opponents to start in a positional sparring arrangement and say, can I start inside your guard, inside your half guard, or something along those lines, so that you're not spending every minute on the bottom. But it's just a hard truth that sweeps are sort of at the core of jiu-jitsu, and you're going to have to tough it through and learn them. I suppose that's probably not very helpful. But
it is tough, but you do have a good point. You could if somebody asked me, anybody, white belt to black belt, said, I'm really want to work on my guard passing, I am 100% happy to play guard the entire round. And that would be...
Yep, I've never seen anybody turn it down.
Yeah, that's easy. I mean, it's not really technique-wise, but if it's just frustrating playing on the bottom for all four of your roles, just ask, hey, do you mind if I work on my guard pass? I haven't been able to pull off a sweep yet today. I always kind of poke fun at myself if that's the situation. I've been trying to get on top. Has it happened? Do you mind if I play a little top game and try to work on that? Because it will help your bottom game as well if you kind of see what the opposite is like. That's one way. Having worked a lot lately on my back attacks, a lot of times taking someone's back is a whole lot different than sweeping someone. The act of sweeping, like they'll base out and they'll lean one way or whatever. Taking someone's back, a lot of times it's a lot less energy intensive, and you can get them to turn the wrong way a little bit, and they still have impossible to knock over, but maybe you can get up and get to their back. Another thing that happens to me quite a bit is you start like a guillotine, and people will try to avoid that, and they'll fall to their back. Not what you would think of as a sweep, but you've put them in a submission attempt to where one of the defenses is to just abandon the position, which isn't typically a smart thing to do, but it happens all the time in training. So if you could make them, say, "Oh, I'd rather not be with my head stuck here. Let's try to get to a more defensive position," and a lot of times they'll kind of abandon ship of the top game. But I'd learn like a good arm drag or something simple like that. Maybe I get around their game a little bit.
Yeah, for me, getting off the bottom, and one thing that has really helped me that was underutilized for me to working with Byron a little bit is frames. A lot of times I would just get smashed so much on the bottom, I couldn't get my hands in position, and I've really worked hard on frames, and that has helped me a lot. Just a little tip that Byron helped me out on, I thought I'd share with you guys. So frame.
Man, that's golden, Gary, because even if you're not getting your sweeps necessarily right away, at least you're making being on the bottom more comfortable and more manageable.
And I don't think you can really get this sweep, without positioning, and if we're so flat, we're never going to get our hook in, we're never going to get the underhook, we're never going to get to that position. And, frames are getting me in that position where I can, start to move my hips a little bit, maybe get a hook in there. So that has really helped me. And I owe that to you, Byron. Now, even though I don't like you very much, I will say good things about you.
Well, don't do it too often.
Oh, don't worry, I don't.
And definitely don't do it behind my back. It would be pointless, right?
Pointless, yep.
Hey, you know what, guys? It's been a while since we've had an audiobook on the show, but Gary's been working on one.
Awesome.
A new audiobook, not the 6 games for BJJ that Byron wrote, not your first year in jiu-jitsu, but jiu-jitsu for mascots. We kind of talked about mascots at the beginning of the show, but Gary's been working on this, jiu-jitsu for mascots. Gary, tell us a little bit about this new book you're working on.
Well, the thing is, when I go to a game to enjoy myself and have, 3 hours of enjoyment, and I only spent like $400 to go, I want to have fun. And a lot of times, if my team isn't winning and I get a little upset and that mascot gets in my face and starts up, it kind of enjoys, me spending $500 to go to that professional game. So, it made me start thinking about how can I get even with these mascots who are ruining my game. And, one thing I thought about is, hey, what skills do I have in jiu-jitsu? So, let's use jiu-jitsu to get even with these mascots. And sounds simple, but it's really not, because you guys know I like to do leg locks, and a lot of times leg locks don't work as well when their foot's in a costume covered with feathers or fur. You slip off a little bit easier. So you have to round your game up. One thing I found right off the bat is a lot of times there's only little eye holes in the costume. So it's always good right off the bat, especially if it's a raptor, to grab the nose and pull down, because that's going to take care of the sight. Once the sight's gone, everything else is easy. A double leg off of that is going to be a lot easier if they can't see it coming. But just little tricks I picked up, and it has made these sporting events a lot more enjoyable to me. When that mascot comes over and gets in my face. So,
Gary, I know one thing about mascots is they're often armed with like T-shirt cannons and stuff, and you've got a chapter. You've got a chapter in there about bringing your own equalizers to the ballpark. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that's good that you said that, because that actually did happen to me. I took a T-shirt cannon from close range to my private parts. That wasn't very fun at all. So what I've started doing, first of all, is, right off the bat, we got to have defense. I know a lot of people say, the best defense is a strong offense, but once you get hit with that T-shirt cannon, boy, that really hurt. So what I do is, whatever I'm wearing, I always make sure I wear a athletic supporter with a cup on top of whatever I'm wearing. That way it's going to protect me right off the bat, so I don't have to worry as much about that. A couple places you can actually use. A couple places have looked at me strange and almost didn't want me to come in looking like that. But the other good thing about it is, I've talked about how much it costs to go to a game. You can hide refreshments and candy and stuff to eat inside there also.
Because there's so much room in there.
Yeah, when there's really nothing else inside the athletic supporter, you can fit some candy in there.
Well, maybe
nobody wants to share with you, Gary.
I might be the only one who has that problem, but it has taken the average price down from $500 to $419.99. So, yeah. So that has really helped me a lot.
If you're at a game where Gary's the mascot and he offers you like a king-size candy bar, just turn it down. He smuggled that thing.
But yeah, I'm really excited about it. I know a lot
not that
excited. But I can't wait for it to come out. I think it'll be a perfect gift for Memorial Day. So let everybody know about it, and get it for all your loved ones there for Memorial Day. And what starts it's time to go to the ballpark. So perfect timing.
You know what? As we're listening to you kind of make up an idea of an audiobook, this would actually be a book that would be able to sell. If you did just a couple seasons as a mascot and got into a couple of fights, you could write a book on how to fight and win as a mascot, and people would want to buy it and give it to people as an entertaining gift and that sort of thing, and talk about, I think that this would be, if done right, could actually be a book. And Gary, wish you the best of luck in getting this thing done before Memorial Day.
If I don't have it done by Memorial Day, it'll actually be a great Labor Day gift. So you have your choice.
Could you imagine walking through like a bookstore, if they still have those in your area, and seeing a book about mascot fighting and not picking it up to look at it?
Oh, everybody would get it. It's, as I like to say, the gift that keeps on giving.
Well, I frequently go to Half Price Books up in Houston. That's what we have in our area. And I always go right to the athletic books first. Look, they've always got a martial arts section, and see if there's anything interesting. And I tell you what, if I saw BJJ for mascots, it would not be on the shelf anymore. When I walked out, it would be in my bag.
Yeah, but you're going to put it in your bag and walk out because you actually could get in trouble. But I guess that would be its own BJJ audio book, how to get yourself out of trouble from shoplifting using BJJ. So, yeah.
No,
I guess
it's 101 ways to test your BJJ abilities.
Yeah. There you go, Joe.
All right, good one, Gary.
Thank you.
Well, Gary mentioned briefly about having a cup that he could store things in. Next week, we have Craig Diamond, and he's really a person who has engineered an entirely new cup and system to help keep you safe, and made a lot of difference in the MMA community. And I'm a guy who doesn't wear a cup, and talking to Craig, he's kind of given me an idea. Maybe I have a reason to, and maybe I should, because the times I have worn them, they've been very uncomfortable, and I don't typically get racked a whole lot. But you know what? The times you do get racked, it does kind of suck. So it's an interesting conversation. We talk about business. We talk about, he also does jiu-jitsu. And we talk about staying safe on the mat and a lot of different aspects. So it'll be an interesting interview. In like 300 episodes, nothing we've really covered yet before. So we've found a new area, and it's kind of in the centrally located part of the body to cover. But next week,
dude,
yeah.
I just Googled this. He's getting hit in the crotch with sledgehammers and baseball bats, getting roundhouse kicked. Man, that must be, now he's taking multiple knees. That must be a heck of a cup.
Yep, yeah, that's one thing you can Google and find something in there.
Well, Diamond MMA, the last athletic cup you'll ever buy. So go check him out.
Yep, and we'll have him on next week, my friends. So until then, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to shower.
Train hard, train smart, train in an athletic cup, and you'll stay safe. We'll see you on the mats, guys.
Gary, is it sweaty in the costume? Are you staying sweaty when you're in
No. I've never been in the cup. Joe, I'm watching it right now. This is hilarious.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.